talk to us about Oxfam. So please welcome Louis.
Thanks very much. Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk today about our work with Oxfam and how we've empowered their supporters to try to make global change. So quick bit about me. So I started Code with my founding partners in 1999. I did have back then, I was had more of a technology slant, but in recent years I've been working more in platform strategy and user experience, and more recently I've been doing more on mobile. So just a bit of insight. I've worked very, very closely with Oxfam. I kind of helped drive that project from Code's perspective, and so I'm going to share kind of some of our insights with some of that work that we've done. So a bit about Code and Oxfam. So we were appointed in 2010, two parts to kind of our work. Part of it was complete overhaul of kind of the user experience. I'll talk about kind of what was there and why the scale of that task was kind of so important, and why from an information architecture and creative consistency perspective that was quite important. And the second part was to move them onto a platform, so that, and a Sitecore platform, so they could start to see some of the operational benefits and some of the ongoing benefits of a platform like that too. So why the Oxfam case study? So what's interesting to everyone about this? There's lots of great challenges. There was the diversity of their audiences. So I don't know if for those of you that are familiar with Oxfam from a supporter and donor perspective, that's kind of a hugely important audience for Oxfam. There's the campaigning and fundraising, the community fundraising, there's all kind of the sporting events, different fundraising events they do, even kind of the music festival events. And then there's the volunteering as well, and then even down to some of their specialist audiences, so the policymakers and the teachers and research, etc. So a real diverse sort of variety of audiences. The size of their existing web presence, I'll talk about. We were basically kind of rationalising what was a massive digital estate. Because Oxfam were actually doing a lot of things really, really well, actually, in respect of they were using all digital channels, and they'd grown a real wealth of good online material. But I guess that needed some pruning was a polite way to put it. And the scale of the organisation itself, actually, Oxfam's quite a large organisation, and they were operating in, I guess, in a very siloed way, and that had led to kind of some of the growth of these different platforms by different departments, and so that had kind of led to some of the complexity of the challenge as well. And that brought about with it some, from a technical perspective, some of the integration challenges of the different systems that they had. But then finally, I guess, from trying to change the way that Oxfam had worked internally. So the way in which they'd previously gone about developing kind of their web portfolio, this was kind of very much siloed and kind of ran departmentally. And so that all ran from one unified platform meant there was a certain degree of kind of internal operational change to and a change in kind of their internal working processes, really, so that they could work with kind of the longevity of a platform like this. So we start with Oxfam's digital vision. So when looking at kind of what their overall objectives were from a digital perspective, the role of digital really was to, as I say, to amplify the voice of the poor, to create and enable supporters to play part in that change. And from Oxfam's perspective, that translated to kind of three areas: to increase their sort of revenue and their money generation through their shops. I'll talk a bit about the shops later, but they have about 700 sort of shops nationwide, and then the online shop revenue as well. And of course, through the increased donations, through the regular giving being a key part, and the sort of the single donations. Connection with their audiences was hugely important. So they really wanted to kind of engage more with their supporters and have them just interact more with Oxfam in different ways. And so that, I say, that engagement, that interaction sort of being going much further and being much deeper. And so that was a key part, and the metrics around sort of audience engagement was kind of really key too. And then finally, capability, and this is kind of where the CMS was a new thing for Oxfam, but that played a huge role actually in rationalising all the different technology and the different sites, the different things they had at play, and that brought with it actually a new way of working that also for the organisation kind of brought some efficiencies and helped them adopt what was a bit of an agile mindset to kind of how they would roll out and sort of develop these things over time. And from a website perspective, absolutely about motivating and inspiring their visitors. They wanted kind of their audiences to be more engaged and be doing more, and they wanted to provide a unified platform to do that on, hopefully get the benefits in correlating back to the vision of sort of the operational efficiencies, whilst increasing kind of their revenues, donations, and audience engagement. So direct correlation there, really. So just to say, the scale of the challenge, so what did they have? I think at some point somebody counted, I think the last count, so the tally seems to keep going up, there was about 20,000 hand-built HTML pages. So it was quite revolutionary in a simple way that it was never ran off any kind of content management system. There were lots of different systems actually. They used WordPress for various things, there was various different PHP applications, they used Microsoft Commerce for the e-commerce shop. There was a variety of kind of different tools and sort of platforms and technologies. And in total, again, at last count, there was about 80 microsites. It was some comedic. We keep finding a new microsite that nobody knew was there. So they had a large, digital estate really of different sites that they were using. The downfall was there was no real central integration, no opportunity to reuse or kind of share any of these learnings across their organisation. And so the great findings, and I'd be often in conversations with some members of the team that were extremely insightful about their audiences and what worked, and these things weren't being passed on and shared to others. So that siloed nature was something we wanted to break out of as well. So, just as a quick snapshot, what did we actually build then? So we rationalised that whole world into kind of a number of distinct propositions. There was the core supporter site that was all about the work of Oxfam, looking at the impact of their work, being able to kind of support through donations, and just find out about the organisation as well. There was the blog aspect that was huge, which is the way in which they delivered all their news, and this kind of ran across all the facets of the organisation. So the blogging platform was huge, but this was all integrated into the main platform. That was the shop, the online shop. Like to give you an idea of the scale of the shop, at the time they had about 150,000 donated products. I think there's roughly about 100,000 now. But as well as all the the virtual gifts, you may have heard of the Unwrapped kind of product range, so donating a goat, etc., for which it kind of had all its custom e-cards and different gift card parts attached to that. But the scale of the shop meant that itself was on par with any of the big high street kind of retailers. Then for some of the specialist audiences, there was the policy and practice site that was really focused on the research papers and the publications and about delivering those to those audiences. And then for the teachers as well, so there was a sub-site that was specifically tailored for kind of the educational audiences and their work. Then we did a whole range of community fundraising sites as well. So again, all powered by the same platform, all under the world and the umbrella of Oxfam, with the same consistent branding throughout. But that allowed us to kind of target some of those audiences more specifically. And then the little Diddy one was mobile. So all of that then was kind of translated, and actually it's still in the process of being translated. A next step we're looking at optimizing the mobile shop, but the majority of all the other platforms have all also kind of been optimized for mobile too. So in order to deal with those multiple audiences and their need, we've kind of developed, really what we class as a family or a kind of a world of Oxfam, all ran from the same system, all sharing content and sharing functionality. And so we've kind of delivered on that kind of unified experience for the users. So what can we share with you about that? What's the good stuff that we think you should know? So I've got about eight little insights here. So the first one is to put the user at the heart of kind of what we do, and we talk about a user-centered design approach. So that's really about identifying your audiences, doing research with those audiences, really understanding what their needs are, what their expectations are, and really looking at kind of their interaction with your organisation as well, and kind of mapping that. But then also validating kind of our thinking, our assumptions and our design with those same audiences so that they are kind of approving that. And this again is all about achieving your business goals. So this is not for any grand view of purely of kind of audience centricity. This is to kind of to achieve the goals of the organisation. How we went about that, so we did some of this collaboratively with Oxfam. They had a great team that we worked with there, and so just looking at kind of some of the highlights there was a lot of time spent. I think I spent 3 days in idea generation workshops with some of the members of the team at the front there. We did a lot of user testing as well. Lots of work with sort of the stakeholders as well in kind of requirements sort of gathering, and that was kind of gathered across business users and business representatives as well as actual end users, and then lots of testing. So all throughout the design, we did a good amount of user testing to be validating our design thinking, our assumptions, and our priorities. So absolutely, stakeholder and end user engagement throughout that process was really, really key. We quite early on, we established some design principles by which we would work from. So it was really important that actually taking a user-centered approach, that we didn't impose the Oxfam infrastructure and departmental silos on how the website would unfold. So we really presented one Oxfam. We really want to play upon the personality. So Oxfam has a lot of history and a lot of heritage and a lot of great work that they've done and continue to do, and lots of people out in the field doing amazing work. So we really want to pull through kind of some of that personality and what they did. We used what is known as PET, Persuasion, Emotion and Trust. It's kind of a social psychology design techniques that we applied, so really just to kind of help us get the most and maximise some of the effectiveness of the content. And then we had a whole host of kind of other ways in which, as we were going through the design process and then creating the content, there were things that we could keep reflecting back on to ensure that actually that everything that we were delivering and the content and everything we were producing was actually in line with the initial principles and way in which we wanted kind of the audience to experience kind of the site and experience the platforms. So user personas were key to that. There was about 15 in general, but we focused on about 6 core audiences kind of throughout. For those personas, we looked at kind of what their user journeys were. So again, really getting into the detail of understanding kind of what the flows of our audiences would be and what they're throughout those steps of the journey. What are their motivators? What are their tasks? What are they looking to achieve? Actually, how could we continue their onward journey once they've achieved what they did? And then throughout that, we applied our PET principles, so seeing actually how can we apply techniques that we know improve kind of effectiveness throughout the stages of those journeys and apply those to the design as well to really kind of help make those more effective. The site architecture, you can imagine with 20,000 pages, was massively important. So there was a lengthy period of embarking on what's known as card sorting. So this is kind of working with end users and stakeholders to kind of help devise the structure and the naming of the site content and architecture. And then tree testing is a technique where before we even design or build anything, actually, we can test the effectiveness of that information architecture and that site map, and just to see actually are our users able to find the things in the places that we've chose to put them. So 2 very simple techniques, but massively, massively important to make sure that actually before we embark on any design and build work that we've got the core architecture correct. And then, as I mentioned, we worked in an agile process, and so throughout the design phase we had a series of design sprints. At the end of each of those sprints we produced these high fidelity prototypes that we tested with real users, and so we're able to get all throughout that design get real feedback, and we actually many times throughout that really optimized lots of the key pages and the key journeys through the site, so by the time we went live actually we knew something that had been almost tried and tested. Point number 2, it's fine to have less content, just as long as you do that content better. Sometimes, and this is something that we encounter quite often, if perhaps if we're engaged, there's perhaps an existing website in play and there's lots of existing content. It's I've never quite been to the extent of Oxfam, but typically someone may have anywhere from 1 to 10,000 pages, and there's a debate about what they should do with that content. And quite often it's the right approach to be bold and actually start again, and to look at kind of what we have, look at the analytics, see what content is relevant to our new principles and our new structure, and make a decision from there. For the case of Oxfam, excuse the font on the boxes there. But in the case of Oxfam, there was lots of inputs to what that new content should be. The existing content was massive. You know, there was also perhaps some additional content from the business requirements and from some of the audience research and from some of the journey work that we'd done. So all that could potentially have fed in. We did an audit. There was about 1,000 pages audited. I think we looked at pages of existing pages that kind of had, I think it was more than 10 views in any given month, and we took that top 1,000 pages, and we found that literally only 9% were kind of receiving the majority of the traffic. So actually what that led to, that in the end the decision was made that actually all the content would be built from scratch. So we perhaps took elements of kind of the best content we had, but everything was actually wrote from scratch with the new tone of voice in the new way, and with kind of the new objectives in mind. Really important to take a multi-screen approach. So the mobile and tablet optimization came at a later stage, but actually the way in which we embarked on initially on the development, we actually built and developed the platform with that in mind. Sitecore is great. It gives you lots of options actually of how you can go about delivering kind of a mobile optimized experience, which is great, which is also down to perhaps how you've built sort of the templates and the components that you've got. So it gives you lots of great flexibility. In this instance, we actually used the personalization, it was the rules engine, to be detecting mobile and optimize everything accordingly. But it can be quite confusing, and it's kind of a key decision to be made. You probably hear that there's loads of terms that get banded around. So, should we take a mobile-first approach? Should it be responsive? Responsive being kind of heralded as the way to do all sort of all mobile or web development. Or now, device agnostic is another phrase that I'm hearing touted quite a lot. So content is separate to anything. It's ethereal. It will work anywhere on anything. So. When it comes down to some practicalities, we opt for an adaptive approach to development. So we know what our customers are doing on those devices, and we know that we need to serve optimized content to a device. So we detect what the devices are accessing it on, but then the content itself that gets delivered actually is responsive, so will work to fit that any device. But we opt for a best of both approach, really. And just to kind of give an example, so some of the core principles that were, we wanted to enter content once and have that automatically be optimized for kind of any display without the need for additional content management to modify for any of the devices. But there are very good cases where we'd look at the journeys, and some of our core journeys, donation, you can imagine being absolutely critical, we wanted to make sure that that was as optimized as it can. And so what Sitecore then allows us to do is, for any specific page or template, we can almost, at an editor's discretion, override. So in the instance of the desktop, this is kind of an interface that responds to mouse gestures, which of course you don't get on a touchscreen interface. So that was kind of swapped out for something that was from a layout and interaction perspective was better optimized for a tablet experience. So this is where we can progressively enhance that experience by taking a component approach and then modifying on a component by component basis in that journey. So it's really important that we gave control in the hands of the content editors, and at the time Oxfam had a team of maybe about a dozen or so different content editors, and again there was different teams that were kind of working on that, but we wanted to have kind of ultimate flexibility, really, what we could do. We knew it was going to be a site that could grow over time, so again it needed to kind of be fresh and kind of have and us to be able to benefit from all the good work that we've built once, to be able to reuse that. And so yeah, again, following this concept of being able to create once and publish to all platforms, that these things would work across all different devices as well. So we very much looked at one of the benefits of Sitecore. We can go from what is perhaps a very fixed templating approach, and so we can deliver things in a consistent manner, to what is a very component-built approach. And so for some things, actually, and for some users, it was more important that we made things as simple as possible, or actually when we're really looking to engage our audiences and kind of produce pages that were kind of really fresh, and actually we could use lots of different kind of interactive components. We went for more of a component approach. And so that meant there was we could really heavily use the page editor, and we could almost drag and drop elements to create these pages. And so if you look around the site, there's kind of some wonderful kind of sort of spectrum of kind of different components that have been used, or different pages that have been all hand-built and crafted actually, but again from a consistent branding perspective and from a kind of reuse perspective. And I think we created somewhere up to probably close to about 100 different components that allowed for any real permutations of kind of layouts and sub-layouts, and lots of different features that can be kind of applied throughout the site. And things like shop components that could be used sort of contextually when perhaps talking about a certain campaign or donation, or little donation widgets that could also kind of be used throughout the site. So lots of scope really. And then we also used the personalization engine. So Sitecore has this great rules engine. A couple of ways it does personalization, but the rules engine is kind of really powerful. And again, we could kind of use that to try to dynamically change content and personalize content as well. I'll talk a bit about that later. So I'll just flick through. So again, you can see all the pages of the site that you see are all built from all those reusable components. So from key category pages to landing pages to specific campaigns to the things that we're doing in emergencies to kind of all the different fundraising activities and the blogs and the blog components. The shop as well is built from the same components within Sitecore. The shop actually has an integration with Microsoft Commerce, so it kind of delivers a lot of the functionality through that. But again, all the merchandising and the prioritization of kind of all the different products and the different product offers and the carousels, etc., is all managed with the same set of components in Sitecore. And then things like the intelligent search as well kind of runs throughout. And then there's the different campaign fundraising, so the music festival, which is Oxfam, and then some of the running and walking and different kind of events, Trail Trekker and Trail Walker, etc. So everything that you've seen is kind of all built from that same set of components. So we really have got from an end user's perspective, there's a consistency in kind of the branding, yet we're kind of able to apply for kind of some of the sub-brands, as you've seen with some of the campaigning sites there. We can apply kind of a skin that kind of works across that, but underneath we're able to, from a content management perspective, use all the same tools and widgets and components that we've created across that full series. Point to share number 5 is to really use existing platforms and technologies and kind of integrate that in. So be aware of kind of what your users are using, and actually what are the other spaces that we can actually maximize on, and how actually can we integrate that into what we're doing to create again some working efficiencies as well. And that was key. And we could really look for the opportunities on this. So say the decision was made that we were to stick with the existing commerce platform, but we applied the front end and the new user experience to that through Sitecore, so actually we could deliver that experience that we wanted, that was integrated through the site. We integrated with the CRM system, so we could really benefit from all the analytics and from all the kind of the data that we'd have on the audiences. But then things that we did for the publications audience, for the policy and practice, we integrated with their internal library management system. And again, we created a flow there that could automatically, it could transpose the publications that we kind of were published through that, through to the site, and then also to disseminate to kind of other kind of social platforms like Scribe, which was kind of one that they used as well as kind of using all the different social components and platforms that I'll talk about in a minute. Number 6, massively important, is to really learn about the audience by testing. And this is something that we really advocate. Quite often, testing often thought of as conversion optimization, which kind of A/B testing and multivariate testing is a strong part of that. But it's a really useful tool as well to not only optimize the effectiveness of some of our journeys, and in particular shop and the donation funnels that we've done, but actually give us some real insight as to kind of how our audience thinks and actually what is important to them. And it can be real benefit in a live environment, as opposed to sometimes when we do user testing in a test environment, because there's no lying or there's no cheating what they actually do. and so the analytics is kind of great for that. So we often talk about that from moving away from during the design and build I guess, a user-centered design process to what is a conversion-centered design kind of way of thinking and make decisions. And this can kind of take away that subjectivity. I'll show you a couple of examples. So one of the examples, and this was ran by Oxfam themselves, when looking at the Syria appeal, understanding what are the motivators and what are the triggers to get somebody to donate. Is it the message? Is it the monetary amount? So these are all things that actually you can only really find out through testing. And so I think in this example, I think we found out that it was important to show a monetary value. I think the control was the one without. The control was, I think, equal with click-through rate, but actually the one with the lowest value in this instance of all of them actually generated the most revenue. So it starts to get us to understand actually what's going to work. And this is kind of repeatable sort of understanding we have of our audiences, and with the campaigns and the promotions and the appeals that we put together in future. And then this is a really, really interesting one. I think it's always a huge discussion point within an organisation. Who should take priority on the homepage? What kind of message should lead? Which department gets their banner above another department, for example? And so this kind of testing and learning is great to take away that subjectivity. So in this instance, we wanted to understand what was more important on the homepage. Only 20% of overall traffic for Oxfam actually came through the homepage first. So most traffic was coming into Oxfam through search and sort of deep linking into what is probably more appropriate and relevant content. So what we wanted to test was, okay, so those are kind of landing on the Oxfam homepage are potentially unsure of perhaps of what it is that they want to do. And so our thinking was, do we test what is, I guess, a brand message and a message about the organisation? So leading with the We Can Make It on the left, telling you about Oxfam's work and kind of what they do. Or should it be more focused on one of our appeals and kind of and one of the campaigns, which is kind of stop the land grabs? And so in running that test, we kind of found that actually the more campaign and action orientated actually got more click-throughs. And what we actually found was it actually made no difference at all, actually, where, even in the carousel below, or the panels below, in which position that we actually placed the general brand link to the click-throughs that had, showing that actually it was definitely more important for us to be leading with that. And although it was important for us to provide information about Oxfam's work and what they did, that actually didn't matter where we placed that. So therefore we could prioritise other things above that. So again, some small insights, but they really give you kind of indication when we're looking to, and the site changes daily and weekly actually. So it's real repeatable learning that we can apply throughout. Number 7, know your social. So everyone's probably guilty of historically of badly using social media. So we really considered what was the appropriate use of social media. And Oxfam were already massively using social media and sort of social networks. And so there was a real consideration about actually what's the best thing for our users. If they're using these channels, actually, do we promote that, or actually do we want to try and capture some of those conversations and discussions and interactions and keep them within our platform, because that's great, that's great material for ourselves. And so we absolutely took the approach of we must maximise kind of the channels that are there, because these are things that they are already using. So we use YouTube throughout the entire site. We kind of that's our only means of sort of delivering some of the video content, and Oxfam continue to grow their YouTube channels, and that has carried on absolutely as is. But then when we talk about those components, we've created a whole raft. This is just a small selection of different social components that we created that could be applied throughout the site, all about encouraging that kind of engagement, interaction, and means of kind of continuing discussion on these other platforms, and spreading the Oxfam message and showing kind of affiliation to what Oxfam were doing through those other channels. So that was hugely important. We did make the decision actually that in some areas, and community fundraising was one, that actually this was a place where we did create our own audiences and our own groups. So people coming together to take part in a race, for example, where they'd sign up a team, or people that wanted to put on music events and kind of get their own bands to come to these events, or just general get-togethers that people could do to do kind of general fundraising of their own. So there were natural things in the work that Oxfam were doing in their fundraising that actually led us to believe that these are actually audiences that we should try and capture and kind of help make the most of. So for that, we also worked with the Zimbra, which at the time was called Telligent. It's a community platform. So what we allowed was that these communities could actually have a place to kind of have conversations as well. So they could start to create their own events, they could create their own forums and discussions, and really kind of share and kind of interact with each other, and and upload their own kind of images and videos, and even create their own events and post their own events and promote and signpost them. So we only just started to kind of make the most of that platform. That's something that's going to carry on from this year as we, in that specific area, we kind of look to grow kind of the engagement that we're getting on that platform. And the very last thing to say is I think it's hugely important to be on a platform that can grow with you. Digital channels are getting increasingly competitive. Year on year, it becomes kind of harder and harder to get that extra performance. So when we look at things that we did 5 years ago or sort of longer, there was one of our clients, I remember we kind of took them from 1 million revenue to 6 million revenue in the year, and we were heralded as the the saviours of their organisation. And it was kind of easier. This was talking about 6 or 7 years ago. Nowadays, it becomes increasingly competitive, and it's increasingly hard. And particularly for Oxfam in the kind of the not-for-profit, there's everybody's after somebody's donation money, so it becomes they need to be doing more, and everyone needs to be doing more and being more sophisticated in kind of what they do. And audiences are expecting more now as well from their interaction with an organisation too. So you absolutely have to make the most of all the tools that are available, and Sitecore kind of gives those tools, but also kind of gives a I guess it calls its maturity model. It gives you kind of a roadmap of which you can actually layer on kind of the different tools and things that it has to offer for you to kind of sophisticate your efforts. So from the things that we've started to do, as I've talked about, using kind of the split testing and the multivariate testing to really understand and optimize kind of the content that we have. We've really just started to look at the rules-based personalization. So started to look at things like the landing pages and kind of and how we can maybe target different audiences, perhaps based on if it was the first visit or a repeat visit, or perhaps other things that they've done. And so again, Sitecore kind of has that amazing rules engine built in that gives you a lot of those tools. And then this is kind of one of the nice examples. So this is kind of one, and the beauty is that actually you can start very simply. Personalization is going to be massively important for 2014 and 2015. I think more and more organizations are looking to actually how can they better personalize that experience. But you can start really slow and kind of layer that on. This is one example we did around Christmas actually, that we created kind of a simple rule that actually just around Christmas just brought in a little bit of Christmas branding on some of the components. So very simple. But once a rule like that is put in place, actually this can roll out annually, or there could be things that we can use. So the rules engine, just to show from a very, very simple thing there, is kind of quite powerful and can target on a whole host of things, from date or from location or from conversions or from goals or from any other activity that somebody's done, perhaps their entry points to the site. Gives you hundreds of kind of different attributes actually you can personalize an experience based on. So it's powerful. It in itself is a real chunk of work for someone to make the most of. But there's still more areas to explore, really. So I've talked about the rules personalization. We're going to be looking more at some of the predictive personalization. So what's great is those audiences and those personas that we create early on, they can also move into Sitecore. And actually what we can then start to do is we can kind of attribute actions and interactions on the site to kind of those personas. And so what we can start to do is dynamically profile audiences. So these are audiences that we know nothing about, have not signed up for anything. We can start to understand what type of persona that they're closely matched to, and therefore we can personalize some of the content. So this is some of the stuff that we can really start to sophisticate with. And then integrating some of the campaign management through some of the marketing tools that Sitecore has. There's great opportunity there. And then looking to do some of the automation. And so Sitecore has a fantastic sort of automation designer, so we can start to see if someone has done this and perhaps we know who they are, we can actually push this content to them or send them an email, or we can actually show them something else. So there's really kind of clever automation tools it has. And then finally, kind of integrating stuff with the CRM as well, and that's data we can kind of, which we've started doing in the case of Oxfam, we can start to push some of that back in, and so we can actually make on-site decisions based on sort of off-site things or activities or stuff that they've done with the organisation. So there's still lots to explore, and we've probably only just kind of scratched on the surface of some of these tools, but this will hopefully form some of the roadmap over the coming months and years. So overall results, how has all that been? We've had some great results. Traffic to the site has increased by by virtue of some of the sharing that we've done and some of the other integration with the email activity and other things. The monthly visits is increasing. Average donation value has increased. Online donations have grown. And the massively important one, donations through mobile have grown by about 200%. So again, real tribute to kind of the need to optimize the mobile experience. And again, in actions taken, that's kind of increased dramatically as well to those that are participating in sort of the petitions and the different kind of campaigns. And so that was it. So last bit, just to end, a bit about me. Probably wondering who's this chap, where's he from? So our agency is Code Computer Love. We're a team of about 80. We're based in Manchester currently. We're a mix of strategy, planning, user experience, creative and technology specialists. And we do these types of stuff. Strategy and UX go through everything we do. Design and build is the core of what we do, working with the Sitecore platform. We start to focus as well on mobile and tablet apps and seeing how the apps can support kind of the overall sort of marketing picture. And then really driving performance to these platforms, the tier at the bottom, so we do campaigns and social activity, and the search and media, I guess, is really all about traffic driving and awareness generating. And the performance and optimization that we've talked about is a lot of that the user testing and the A/B testing, really to kind of get the most and maximize the performance of the platforms. So that kind of paints the picture of kind of what we do. And we've been lucky enough to do it for these great clients in our 15 years that we've been going. And that was me. Thanks. Any questions?
Before we start, we've got a mic coming. We've got a little Red Riding Hood coming with the mic. So yeah, any questions? Go.
First of all, really great presentation. I'm Steve from Big Group, Technical Director.
Thank you.
I think you're running a really nice methodology, which is fantastic. You've got all the elements there, personas, wireframes. Really good to see someone do that really well. From a point of view, when you get to wireframes in design, do you find that you get a bit of back and forth there in that process between the designer and the UX, kind of thinking, I'd like to do it this way, I'd like to do it that way? And how do you manage that?
Well, when we work on the actual sort of design and build, we bring multidisciplinary teams together, and we kind of work with Scrum. So the designer and the UX are actually, we group them together. And so the way that we ran, say, in this project, for example, we had 2 tracks. We had a sort of design and UX track that were working together, and then we had the dev track that was just a bit behind, so that all the decisions got made before they had to start to build anything. But they worked really kind of closely together. And the benefit we had, because we knew also that we were going to be testing each sprint, so if there were debates, we kind of put some of those things kind of into testing as well. And so there was a couple of things, like for example, the header navigation actually went through it in the 5 user testing sessions that we did. We did variants each time in that. Actually, we kind of kept optimizing that just to see, because a lot of the time there's real subtleties in how perhaps when something's wireframed and these are elements that we want, I think how that actually gets executed from a design perspective can massively affect the usability of it as well. And so we did lots of testing with kind of the subtleties of kind of colours and contrast and sort of positioning and spacing and all these types of things. So we got something that both the UX consultants and the designers were kind of quite happy with, really.
And did you finish when it came to the UX and design, did you finish that part first? And I mean, often what we do is we do like a sprint zero, where you can start to set up Sitecore and you can start to get some of the key elements in place. But then we tend to get the UX design, user testing and iteration for that part done, and then we move into front-end development and actual development. Do you tend to work like that, or do you do it, are you doing that part first, the design?
Yeah, we have a sprint zero as well. So it's really important just to establish the kind of the core creative principles. So and also get, from a technology perspective, get kind of the infrastructure stuff set up. So sprint zero was about getting a lot of that done. We'd gone through a certain amount of definition of certain things like, the site architecture and some of the requirements backlog and getting all that in a state. But then we the UX and creative actually kind of then they do sort of work together through the detail, really. So we get the core principles agreed up front, and definitely, and that's probably just being practical to understand that actually the more stakeholders are going to want to have input on the overall kind of creative approach and kind of some of the key site-wide elements. So the general sort of application of the brand and sort of the navigation, for example, and some of the core elements. So we'll do a few pages. I think we picked in this instance for Sprint Zero, it made about 5 or 6 key screens that we designed that kind of basically establish what that core look and feel would be, so that as we went through the sprints, actually we were just iterating and making tweaks to that, and we weren't going back and doing massive kind of creative kind of repainting of everything that we'd done. So we find it's really important to get all that stuff with a wider stakeholder team kind of agreed as part of the Sprint Zero, and then the actual sprints kind of are more about the detail and kind of designing the detail of kind of the components and the interaction and the different elements.
And the only thing you didn't mention was user stories. Are you using a product backlog in your sprints?
Yes, yeah. So I didn't mention about the dev team either. Sorry. So the dev team as well. Just to finish off, they would be Sprint Zero, and then it kind of carried on. They would be doing a lot of the core things, working from the user stories to get a lot of the kind of the back end stuff in place. But they were, before our front end guys kind of got to build the templates, they were, I think in the end, about 2 sprints behind, just so that we had enough time from some of the iterations in the testing. There was a little bit of rework as some of the things actually we continued to test, but that was generally minimal. But they were definitely, there was this kind of lag. But I think with the timescales, we need to actually get going, and so actually we need to have some kind of overlap in what we were doing. So this multi-track approach of design and UX, and then build kind of just kind of a little bit behind that. But yeah, we went through all the requirements. They were all turned into user stories, and so we absolutely worked with. It was traditional Scrum kind of methodology that we used, and with product backlog broken down into sprint backlogs. So we had a sprint backlog that was for the creative split in 2, and those for kind of the dev team as well.
And from a cost management point of view, obviously a lot of clients want an initial cost for the build. How do you go about managing that at your agency in terms of giving, did you build an initial backlog and then cost that, or how did that go about?
That's right, yeah. So we gave an upfront cost for the definition of all the work to get the backlog ready and to kind of look at the overall IA and understand what the scope of the work would be. So there was a cost to go through that process. And then at the end of that, actually, throughout that process, we worked quite closely with them on that backlog. So there was a lot of time spent with the requirements, understanding the requirements. There was a lot of requirements, and there was different bits of the business that kind of fed into that. So it was hugely important that we understood what these requirements were. And
I've just spent 18 hours in workshops in the last week and a half.
I think at one point we had a 3-day back-to-back just to go through the first pass, to go through all 600. I think we worked out we need to do a requirement every 3 minutes.
But I'm thinking about 432 at the moment, user stories. So.
Yeah. So what we then had to do, we had to get to a point at which actually at the end of that we had a better understanding of kind of what that was, and then we were able to kind of cost for what our understanding of delivering that backlog would be, really.
And do you think, in the long term, just picking up on that actually, do you think now that you've laid all of that groundwork, does it make life easier for you going forward? Does it all become much cheaper, much more efficient, much easier as you're progressing with Oxfam, having laid all those foundations?
Definitely in terms of the platform, we've absolutely taken the approach that there was no corners cut whatsoever. It was imperative that the core platform was built well, and that actually everything was based on the best principles of Sitecore. And Sitecore, tip their hat to us, saying we did a really, really good job of that implementation. And it's often cited as one that they acknowledge as really good use of Sitecore. And that component approach that we've taken. So there's a lot of reuse as it is, and I think testament to the team. If you look at, I just had a look the other day, not looked at the site for a few weeks, and actually there was a whole raft of new content was on there, and they're using all kind of the features and the components we had, and again it's got this this real rich tapestry of kind of content and features, but kind of all managed through the one interface and kind of all standardized across and all with consistent branding and approach. So it's kind of maintained that, which is great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I was going to say we've probably got time for one more question, and then before we all die of hypothermia, we can go and get a cup of tea. So is anyone else? We've just got at that way, down the right there. Brilliant.
Hi. Oxfam was obviously a huge, charity, massive, different target audiences. So before you sort of start your sprint stages and agile and all that sort of stuff, how do you really go about getting to really researching and getting under the skin of your target audiences, because there's such a breadth of them?
Yeah, well, there was before we were engaged. Actually, there was masses of work already done. So Oxfam, it's important to point out, Oxfam had a team that had been working on that, and actually they'd as part of their CRM, they had a really good understanding of their audiences as well. But I think when we started to get involved, they were working on more specific web audiences. So before we started any of that kind of actual site definition work, there was a massive period of was a huge period of kind of the requirements gathering for one from the users, and there was a long period of actually speaking to end users, and other agencies were involved in that as well. There's been quite a few other people involved throughout the process, because it was such a large overall undertaking. So there was sufficient time given to kind of that user understanding and that exploration before we got more to the site specifics.
Yeah. Right, tea break now, but thank you, Louis. That's been fascinating stuff.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.